Summoners. At this point, I don't think the Japanese really know how to write summoner characters. Not that they don't know how to write them per se, but it's that in almost every manga, light novel, and anime I've watched, especially the ones for this channel, I have yet to see a summoner character be written correctly. The summoner class is one of the most diverse classes you can have in a fantasy setting. You can summon creatures for offense, defense, transportation, healing, buffs, debuffs, scouting, you name it. But in a world that has summoners, your story needs to explain why everyone isn't a summoner. For example, in most shows I've watched for this channel, the most common reason given to prevent anyone in the world from being a summoner is simply how rare they are. In Isekai Cheat Magician, we're told that summoners are rare, and that summoners are really only people who have been summoned from another world. In Hell Mode Isekai, it's basically the same thing. The main character chooses to become a summoner because he wants to experience quote-unquote Hell Mode. And then we have Kenja no Dashi wo Nanaru Kenja, or She Professed Herself Pupil of the Wise Man. This one is especially interesting because the world starts as a VR MMO with complete and total freedom.
The VR MMORPG, Arc Earth Online. Complete and total freedom. Everything was left in the hands of the players. While in other games, the methods to obtain and master skills were provided to the player. Here, there was no such guide. They were forced to figure it out on their own.
So what exactly is stopping someone from becoming a summoner? Let me summarize the story. To start, we learn that the game is a VR MMO with complete and total freedom. Skills aren't simply handed to you when you level up. Instead, if you want to learn a skill, you actually have to learn how to do it. For example, you wouldn't automatically get fire magic if you were a mage from leveling up. You actually have to learn and train the magic. And of course, with a system like that, rivalries were inevitable, eventually leading to a period of war called the Age of Strife. Warrior classes were very easy to level up, and magic and magic-based classes didn't fare that well during the Age of Strife, so they all fled to a country created by the 9 wise men, 2 of those players being the MC and his real-world friend. In the game, MC was Danbolf, an old wizard who worked under King Solomon. We really don't know much about their real-world relationship. We do see them going out to the movies, though. At the start of the story, the kingdom is attacked by monsters. Danbolf, a summoner who is called the One-Man Army, uses his summons to destroy the entire army with relative ease. He also has martial arts skills known as the Immortal Arts. A few days after this event, Danbolf disappears. The next part of the timeline is kind of hazy, but it seems Danbolf went to use a vanity case, which was an item that allowed you to change the way your character looked in the game. Danbolf says he fell asleep in this vanity case, and then the game became real. Everyone was transported into their characters. The NPCs started acting differently, and suddenly everyone could hear, feel, smell, and eat food instead of it just being tasteless items in-game. Why Danbolf was asleep for 30 years is something the story never really explains. My best guess is that the timeline between the vanity cases and the real world is different. Basically think of it as its own dimension. So when he finally wakes up, decades have passed, and he's in a different avatar. Eventually he finds one of his friends, King Solomon, who hasn't aged a single day. Why none of the summons, players, or NPCs have seemed to age is never really explained by the story. The story follows Danbolf now masquerading as Mira as she tries to find the other wise men because the kingdom is in dire straits. To spoil the entire show, we never actually see her find any of the other wise men, although 3 of them are mentioned. The anime ends with a giant CGI boss battle and a massive monster horde, which is taken out with relative ease due to her summons. We're not here to talk about the story though. It was a 4 out of 10 story. What I actually want to talk about is why are summoners so rare. Here's a list of basically every summon we see the main character use throughout the story. There's the White Snake, which can bite someone and clear any poison or status effects they have. Luckily the show does explain that it can't restore blood or exhaustion. Then we have the 7 Valkyries, who are insanely powerful individually. The White Knights, who are basically walking shields for defense. The Dark Knights, which have swords for offense. The Pegasus, which unsurprisingly allows her to fly. The White Dragon, which allows her to fly, can transform into a human, and is responsible for defeating the monster at the end of the show. Then there's the Angel that can buff her summons without any seemingly strict requirements and can also deal damage. Cat Sith with a sign, who's basically just a flashlight. There are 2 Koro Pokerus, which can provide detection, speak foreign languages, and also buff allies. Then there's the Salamander, which can apparently fly, although other salamanders we see don't have this ability, and it's also a basic damage dealer. But as you can see, she has almost every possible situation covered. And technically, we could also mention the spirit she's bonded with. The spirit gives her immunity to all status effects. Yup, you heard that right. Every single one. Every single one of those summons has a different set of skills. So my question is, what are the requirements? Because the MC never really explains any meaningful requirements for her summons. She never gets drained, she never gets tired, she never seems to run out of magic. There doesn't seem to be any meaningful limitation on what she can summon. And you can say, well, anyone can do anything. Okay, but even then, skills need limitations. If one skill can do anything, that's bad game design. But fine, let's say there's no requirements. Then how is the main character and summoners in general so limited? The story never answers that question. She always has the perfect summon for the perfect situation. Every summon does exactly what she needs. And she can even partially summon them when she doesn't need their entire body. Need swords? She can just summon the sword. Need shields? She can just summon the shields. I understand she's one of the 9 strongest people in the world. The problem is that if you're going to make a rule saying that anyone can theoretically do anything, then you need to explain why summoners aren't everywhere. We actually see an NPC boy who wants to become a summoner after watching the main character. He gets a rating for something, and then we're told that he doesn't have the aptitude for being a summoner.
He has the potential to become a great sorcerer, priest, or diviner. I also measured his capacity for magic in general, and it was far above average. Tact has a promising future.
Yes, but not as a summoner.
Okay. What are the requirements? Obviously, there's at least some. The show never explains them. It could be restricted to only players, and we would have absolutely no idea. To play devil's advocate for the show, let's say you need to defeat every monster in battle before you're able to summon it. That would make sense, I guess. Why would every player want to spend their entire life hunting down boss monsters just so they could summon them? However, this is immediately contradicted by Hinata, the dog demi-human. She's an instructor and hasn't seen combat a day in her life. Do you seriously expect her to defeat a salamander? There's also clearly some level of training involved. Depending on the monster and how it's trained will determine how powerful the summon actually is. We see this with Hinata, the knife-eared guy, and MC. They have the exact same summon, but the results are completely different. Hinata's summon is more sluggish, more cartoony, and isn't as fast as knife-eared guy. But then the MC completely trumps both of them. Her salamander is able to fly, something both of them didn't even know was possible. So it can't simply be you have to defeat the monster. Maybe you need to find an egg or something and train it from birth. That would make sense for some summons, except for Valkyries. We only ever see Valkyries when they're summoned by the main character. We never actually see them existing independently in any other situation. We'll combine the two. Let's say for some rare monsters you have to defeat them in combat, while for weaker ones they are able to be tamed. Obviously there's some rankings to the monsters, though we only really hear about legendary. But hey, that's enough to establish some sort of hierarchy. At this point though, I'm basically writing the story for the writer. And listen, I'm not stupid. I understand that most of these things are probably explained better in the light novel or manga, but like I've said before, I'll say it again. You shouldn't need to read a light novel or manga to understand an anime. Everything important should be explained in or by the story itself, especially something as fundamental as why summoners are extinct. The anime mentions summoners going extinct several times. They could have at least given us a throwaway line of dialogue, something like, yeah, if I was an NPC, I wouldn't want to spend my entire life fighting boss monsters either. Or, back in the game, it made sense why no one wanted to be a summoner. Who would be crazy enough to fight that many boss monsters, especially with one life? Or even, yeah, I wouldn't have been a summoner if I didn't have the help of the other wise men, or you, Solomon. That's literally it. One sentence. One sentence that explains the difficulty while also giving us an idea of why the main character is basically one of 3 people we see who are summoners. Instead, everyone just reacts to her summons like, whoa, you're a summoner? And nobody asks why. The problem isn't that Mira is overpowered. It's that the story creates a world where summoning would be incredibly useful, gives us almost no clear limitations or requirements, and expects us to believe that hardly anyone can do it.